I would like to call the CCRB's December public meeting to order. I am pleased to welcome the
I go by he, him pronouns and wanted to welcome Mr. Jamaat to the board.
Eddie Hogan, Queens City Council Representative.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sal Carcaterra, and I'm a police commissioner designee to the board.
Thank you, board members. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented. May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved as presented. Earlier today, the police commissioner sent a letter to her staff regarding her intention to amend the disciplinary process. She detailed certain instances of the 70-plus times she deviated from the CCRB's recommendations and that she had interpreted the evidence differently. I would like to be very clear and say that I stand by the CCRB's recommendations. CCRB's investigations are detailed and thorough. The members of this board and its staff are trained to collect and review all evidence in an impartial and fair manner. The board uses its judgment, perspective, and most importantly, the evidence to determine whether misconduct occurred. The NYPD approaches these cases from a different perspective when reviewing the evidence. 30 years ago, this city wrote into law that a civilian board should investigate allegations of police misconduct because the police shouldn't police themselves. We will continue to work with the NYPD to improve the disciplinary process and look forward to conversations about how to improve the matrix. 2022 has been another year of dedicated work and impactful growth for the CCRB. I was appointed interim chair at the beginning of this year and have gotten to see firsthand how hard this agency works for the people of New York. We made great strides in day-to-day investigations, how we interact with the public, and larger initiatives to strengthen police accountability. I will now mention highlights from teams across the CCRB. The agency took major strides when the board officially voted to change the rules to expand the CCRB's investigative jurisdiction and improve transparency and communication with the public. The new unit on racial profiling and bias-based policing has already begun investigating dozens of cases, and the agency has received 20 cases of body-worn camera misuse. The rule changes also officially updated CCRB terminology in an effort to provide greater accessibility to information about police oversight and make it easier for all New Yorkers to understand CCRB documents. We also translated CCRB materials into 12 languages in order to ensure that all New Yorkers can learn about their rights when interacting with officers and filing complaints. This is part of the agency's larger effort to increase transparency, which has included posting police department deviation letters to our website along with redacted closing reports. Since the repeal of 50A, we have continued efforts to make our work accessible to the public, including completing 375 FOIL requests in the last year and sending out 554 sets of records. In May, our investigators closed the 321 protest cases, some of the most complicated cases that have come through our agency, while also looking into the thousands of other complaints that can continue to come in. The investigations unit also restructured NYPD documentation request and collection in order to shorten investigation timelines and has reintroduced mediation, one of the most successful resolutions for CCRB cases. Our administrative prosecution unit has more than tripled the number of cases on its docket than it had last year. This is largely due to the discipline matrix, which has resulted in more cases being recommended charges and specifications. While the unit was below its normal headcount while receiving this huge influx of cases, they persevered and have since hired 5 prosecutors over the summer. An additional 4 prosecutors will start in January of 2023. Throughout this year, our outreach team went above and beyond by reaching over 35,000 New Yorkers in their efforts to educate people about their rights when interacting with police officers and the resources available to them. They conducted nearly 800 presentations, making sure to reach out to vulnerable groups such as youth groups and New Yorkers who were not proficient in English. The outreach team also participated in a series of parades, marches, events, and workshops tailored to support our LGBTQIA+ community. I would also like to thank the Young Men's Initiative for providing us with the funding to promote our resources in various radio and print outlets, including Z100, Black Information Radio, Urdu Times, El Diario, and the Caribbean Times. The CCRB's ability to investigate racial profiling and bias-based policing allegation was put into effect on August 22nd, 2022. The CCRB's outreach, IGA, and community departments conducted the annual Week of Awareness from October 24th to 28th to share this information with the public. During this 5-day-long event, we partnered with elected officials, city agencies, and community organizations to coordinate an outreach social media campaign to educate the public about the agency's ability to investigate racial profiling and bias-based policing allegations. The outreach team, alongside the racial profiling and bias-based policing unit, conducted a total of 27 outreach events, which included 15 street teams and 12 community information sessions throughout the 5 boroughs. The CCRB led its 4th class of Youth Advisory Council members, engaging 20 young people from all 5 boroughs who gave insight into their experiences with police and hosted an event to shed light on youth and policing. CCRB was also thrilled to host 15 SYEP students who worked on a range of projects, including our agency-wide resource drive to provide product donations to Breaking Ground to boost their efforts supporting those experiencing street homelessness. This year, we set up training for all senior staff members from the NYC Commission on Human Rights on how to create a more inclusive work environment for CCRB LGBTQIA+ staff. The CCRB became the first agency, to our knowledge, to update employee staff displays to include pronouns, installed menstrual product dispensers in all bathrooms, including men's room, and implemented an agency-wide standard email signature which provides the option to include an employee's respective pronouns. We ensured CCRB continued to be a leading voice in national police oversight conversations by participating in NACLO's annual conference and meeting with oversight agencies around the country to help establish best practices. 2022 was a landmark year for the CCRB, and there are many more accomplishments by the agency that were not mentioned here. So thank you to the entire staff for continuing to do great work. We will now hear from Executive Director John Darsh. John?
Thank you, Chair Rice. On the staffing front, I have some good news and bad news. The good news first. The Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, approved onboarding 4 APU prosecutors, along with a digital media specialist and an outreach coordinator. The digital media specialist and outreach coordinator have already started with the agency, and the prosecutors are expected to start in January. We were hoping to hire 2 more classes. In addition, we are going to have a new investigative class of approximately 10 investigators in January. We were hoping to hire 2 more classes around that size in 2023, but the current budget outlook is that we will probably not be able to do that. While our charter and investigative powers have continued to grow each year, the number of people we have investigating cases has not gone up. We need more people to keep up with our expanding responsibilities, and we'll keep working with the Office of Management and Budget to ensure that we do keep up. Another focus for the coming year is an exemption from sealing statutes. The agency has been calling for an exemption from sealing statutes for several years, and yet misconduct continues to be hidden behind sealed records. This can impede and extend our work unnecessarily, doing a disservice to all New Yorkers. A clear example of this is the case which was recently in the news regarding the CCRB's administrative prosecution of police officer Wayne Isaacs for the killing of Delron Small. Officer Isaacs' records were sealed when he was found not guilty by a jury in a criminal case. In order for the CCRB to properly prosecute his case, we need access to the evidence in that criminal case. The CCRB filed a motion in October 2021 to unseal these documents, and over a year later, you're still waiting to hear back from the judge. This is just one case. In the new racial profiling cases that we will be investigating, there are potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of cases that we are going to need access to. Imagine if we had to wait over a year on every single one of them. If our legislators eliminated these roadblocks, we would be able to do our work much more effectively and expeditiously than we currently can. Today, our office is open for walk-in complaints, but it is also possible to file a complaint online at nyc.gov/CCRB complaint. That is nyc.gov/CCRB COMPLAINT. You could also contact us by telephone at 1-800-341-2272 or by dialing 311. If anyone wishes to file a complaint tonight, we have investigators on hand ready to take any new complaints. Kamani Dunkley and Emma, are you guys here?
Yeah, I'm Kimani.
Thank you, Kamani. Thank you, Emma. And then Yvonne Torres from the CAU is also here to assist us as well. If you are online and joining us and would like to speak, please use the raise your hand function. Whether you are joining us online or in person, please limit your comments to a 4-minute maximum. I want to thank the staff as always for all your hard work And thanks to the public for attending.
May I ask the members of the board if you all have any questions of our executive director? Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Do you wish me to hold that for later?
Make the comment, Frank, please.
I am not sure exactly, but it feels like a year and a half ago the Matrix was introduced. And at the time, we and the police department agreed that there would be ongoing dialogue and that we would submit a report with what we thought were its strengths and weaknesses. In truth, I don't know if we ever did that. But what I do know is that I have sat on many panels, one as recently as 48 hours ago, with not only myself, but another board member commented on feeling that the penalties in the Matrix in particular cases were excessive. Given this is the case, and given that I've sat on many panels where not only myself but other board members have felt penalties were excessive, I think it is a good thing, and as part of an ongoing process, the Matrix needs to be evaluated for penalties that are both excessive and inadequate. So I am extremely pleased that the police department is engaging in a continuing discernment process, and I would encourage us collectively as a board to submit reports and opinions, including majority opinions of the board and minority opinions of the board, on what is excessive and what is inadequate.
Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate that comment. Anyone else with any comment before we proceed? Okay. Hearing none, we'll hear a presentation from the Director of Outreach, Mr. Jahai Rose.
Thank you very much, Chair Rice. Bear with me while I share my screen. In the meantime, I'm Jahai Rose. I go by he, him pronouns, and I'm the Director of Outreach for the CCRB. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
As you may know, the Civilian Complaint Review Board is the city's largest independent oversight entity over the largest police force in the country. The CCRB investigates, mediates, and prosecutes complaints of misconduct alleged against officers of the NYPD. The agency is governed by a 15-member board. You've met many of the board members here. 5 seats are appointed by the New York City Mayor, 5 are appointed by the New York City Council, 3 designated by the Police Commissioner, 1 appointed by the Public Advocate, and the chair is jointly appointed by the New York City Mayor and the New York City Council. Now, the CCRB has a 4-part jurisdiction for allegations that we can investigate. The helpful acronym to remember is FATO, which stands for force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, and offensive language. Just a little bit of information regarding the Right to Know Act. The Right to Know Act was a law that went into effect on October 19th of 2018. It impacts certain interactions with police officers. Under certain circumstances, officers should identify themselves by providing their name and other identifying information, such as rank, command, and shield number. With some exceptions, they should explain the purpose of an encounter. They should also inform individuals of their right to say no when asking for their consent to search an individual's person, property, vehicle, or home. In certain circumstances, they should offer a business card that lays out the officer's information and explains how to file a comment and/or complaint about the encounter with that officer. Civilians can request these business cards in all encounters, all interactions. This is a copy of what the business card looks like. There are various ways to file complaints with the Civilian Complaint Review Board, as mentioned by Executive Director John Darsh. One of the easier ways is by utilizing our website at nyc.gov/CCRB complaint. You could also call the CCRB's hotline at 1-800-341-CCRB or 1-800-341-2272. Remember, if you see footage of misconduct on social media or in the news, you can feel free to file a complaint even if you were not there in person. The typical handle for the CCRB is CCRB_NYC. Additional ways to file a complaint with the CCRB include calling 311. You could also visit the CCRB's headquarters at 100 Church Street on the 10th floor in Lower Manhattan. You could file a complaint on social media by direct messaging the CCRB. Our platforms are Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You could also send a letter to the CCRB's office at 100 Church Street, 10th floor, New York, New York, zip code 10007. You could also file a complaint at a local police precinct. It does not have to be the precinct where the encounter took place. Officers are required to accept CCRB complaints at any precinct, or you could request a complaint form and a postage-free envelope. The CCRB is hiring. You can feel free, if you are interested in positions with the agency, which include investigators, investigating attorneys, trial preparation assistants, and so many other positions, feel free to check the nyc.gov/jobs website and put CCRB into the search. Alternatively, if you do not see a role posted and you still like to submit a cover letter and resume, feel free to email us at careers@ccrb.nyc.gov for any future interest. The CCRB's Youth Advisory Council applications are live. The CCRB's Youth Advisory Council is a working committee made up of young leaders who are on a committee, and they are committed to criminal justice issues and improving police and community relations. Members advise CCRB staff about its efforts to engage young New Yorkers, serve as ambassadors to their communities, and to their communities about the agency, and they join team building activities. Eligibility to apply for the CCRB's Youth Advisory Council, such you have to be between the ages of 10 and 18 and a New York City resident. If you'd like more information about the Youth Advisory Council, feel free to email outreach@ccrb.nyc.gov. Information regarding applying for the Youth Advisory Council will also be put in the chat. If you'd like an outreach presentation for your community members, organization, school, feel free to also reach out to the CCRB's outreach team at outreach@ccrb.nyc.gov. Also, feel free to follow us on our social media platforms. That's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you very much, Chair X.
Thank you. Jahai, you mentioned that the advisory council link is live. What is the due date?
Due date will be January 31st.
Thank you. Do any other members of the board have any questions of Jahai? Any questions? All right, hearing none, we will now enter the public comment portion of the meeting. We'll begin with those joining us virtually who would like to make a comment, followed by those who are joining us in person. For those joining virtually, please use the raise your hand feature. Please keep your comments to 4 minutes. Yahira, would you please call on the first person?
Thank you, Chair. We will first be hearing from Chris Dunn.
Oops. Okay, good afternoon. Arva, can you hear me?
You're faint, but we can hear you.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm trying to have my camera on, but okay, I apologize for that.
Much clearer. Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
Okay. First, welcome, Mr. Jamaat. It's always nice to see new board members. Not to put you on the spot, but I think it's always nice for the public to hear from new board members about their experience with policing and their views about police oversight. So I hope at some point in the future you'll be able to do that. But Arva, I want to talk about your opening statement about the communication that went out from the police commissioner this morning. I appreciate your strong statement. It's the right thing to be saying. I view this as being almost a direct attack on the CCRB. And Frank, I understand that reasonable people might disagree about the matrix. I don't think it's reasonable for the police commissioner to be sending out this sort of communique to everyone in the police department without a lot of conversation and a lot of consultation with the CCRB. This is a message, as I read it, that says to every single member of the department, I, the police commissioner, am going to undo CCRB recommendations. I'm going to undo CCRB substantiations. The CCRB is not a credible investigative agency. And this is almost buried at the bottom, we are going to undo the matrix. And the matrix was something that was a heavily worked on document and went through a whole lot of public process. I do not think it is constructive or appropriate for the police commissioner in an email to every member of the department to be announcing essentially publicly, and this has been given to the press and they'll be reporting about it, that the police department is going to undo the matrix. So I believe in the CCRB. I believe in the recommendations the CCRB is making. I understand the point that there should be consultation between the CCRB and the department about discipline, of course. But to me, this approach borders on an act of bad faith, is not an example of the police department working with the CCRB. To me, it's an example of the police department getting ready to brawl with the CCRB. And Arva, I'm glad that you're pushing back, and I hope that the board pushes back, because there needs to be a better way to address concerns about discipline than this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective, for your analysis, for your interpretation. I'm hoping that some of your interpretation is incorrect, and that we will be able to have a positive working relationship with NYPD as we look at and review the matrix, as Frank pointed out that we were commissioned to do, and certainly every member of this board wants to look at and work together in order to utilize what was the initial promise of the matrix, and that was to push for increased accountability with the NYPD. So I'll leave it with that and see if John wanted to add anything.
I have nothing really to add to Chris's comments, but back to what Board Member Dwyer said. On behalf of the agency, I've been in touch with executives at the NYPD and have shared concerns that have been expressed by board members about the matrix. I've been told that there is a working group at PD that has been working on it and have been waiting to interact with them, and assume that process will start now after reading the message about discipline that was sent to the members of service today.
I was curious, was the message about the commissioner disagreeing with penalty or disagreeing with our recommendation of substantiation?
So
Because the substantiation recommendation has nothing to do with the matrix and you're just disagreeing.
So there were 3 instances referenced in the letter. The first 2 instances are individual cases, and the third instance is a group of cases. And in the first case, in the letter, it describes her having a difference on whether the officer should be disciplined at all. And then the second 2 have to do with the level of penalty for the misconduct that occurred. In the first case, there were 4 allegations substantiated against the member of service. The police commissioner felt that 2 of them should not have been substantiated, and she did discipline the member of service for the 2 allegations that she determined were misconduct.
Well, and John, to add to that, if you can still hear me, I mean, she's not just talking about 3 cases. She says in 70 cases, she's either reduced the penalty or dismissed the case outright. So it is both. And you're absolutely right. Dismissing it outright, that's challenging the substantiation. It's got nothing to do with the matrix. And this is where, and Arva, I hope that this is not as destructive as it sounds. She then, in the next sentence, makes a point of saying she has done this more than any recent police commissioner. It is like she is staking out territory as a matter of pride that she is dismissing CCRB substantiations or reducing penalties. And again, we can all, reasonable people can disagree about particular cases and about particular circumstances. This feels like it's simply an attack on the CCRB.
Is it possible for the board members to get a copy of the email?
Yes, I think it's been made. We found out about it in the paper, so I think we should be able to distribute it to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to interpret it otherwise because it was sent to everyone except the CCRB, so it doesn't seem indicative of trying to work anything out with the CCRB, and I don't really, I don't understand how seeking to amend the disciplinary process seems very ambiguous, but it doesn't sound like trying to establish a better functioning relationship with CCRB.
I do not disagree with that. Do any other members of the board have a comment?
Chair, I just like clarity on those 70 cases, so in the ones that discipline is being placed, are we receiving deviation or any sort of communication as to why it is not at the level that we had recommended, or is it sort of she is taking it upon herself to deviate without informing us of her reasoning for the deviations?
The police commissioner is providing us with memos that explain the reasons for her deviations. Did that get picked up?
Any other questions or comments from our board?
Sat on many panels in the last, I'm going to say year and a half, I'm not really sure, where board members have said that if the matrix did not recommend a certain panel, they would have imposed a lower penalty. But since they felt that the initial agreement was to try to hold the matrix, they were going to impose a penalty higher than they instinctively felt was appropriate. And that didn't happen once. That has happened. And my fellow colleagues on the board disagree with me, say that, but I've heard that said many times, and I heard it said again 48 hours ago when I sat on a panel. So, I mean, the original matrix was and is, as it will be, a working document. And it's a working document that, frankly, I think there were many cases where the initial penalties were too high, and perhaps some cases where the initial penalties were too low.
I think Mr. Dwyer makes a very good point. And we were involved in conversations with the police department during the NYPD reform process from, I think it was 2020 and 2021 that resulted in the matrix. And then when the department published its matrix, we worked with them on the MOU that resulted in this agency adopting the matrix. And then I'm forgetting the exact date, but I'll find out for the board. There were communications back and forth about issues with the matrix that resulted in an amended matrix being issued. So this is actually the second version of the matrix that we are working with. And we will continue to work with the department in good faith to make sure they know the issues that the board members are surfacing, and we'll go forward in that vein. That exactly as Mr. Dwyer was saying. But this is not the CCRB choosing the matrix. This is the department's matrix.
I will say from my personal experience, I have had as many instances feeling like a penalty was excessive as I've had feeling like a penalty was too low. I think 3 days for a Fourth Amendment violation of someone being stopped and frisked without cause is unacceptable. But I was willing to apply those penalties because I thought both sides were going to be adhering to the matrix. And it seems to me that only CCRB has been adhering to the matrix, whereas the police commissioner has deviated at will whenever, based on any reason or any justification at all. I don't find the deviations legitimate. I understand that she disagrees, but I think that there has to be some reasoned basis for disagreement, and there needs to be discussion. And I just think the approach of sending this email blast out is a sort of saying that it's not going to promote a functioning relationship. And it's not meant to. It's an attack.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to oh, I'm sorry. You? Yeah.
I just want to ask a question, Mike, because we're here to try to make things correct. And so to the point that there might be some penalties that some might agree might be too harsh, it's also in the same time, in the same case, where you're looking at body-worn cameras not on, body-worn cameras not present, a request by CCRB to get body-worn cameras never returned back. The request, and then you also have many cases where the officers are not identified. Okay, then you have subject retired. So if we're going to correct stuff, let's look at stuff, aside and correct stuff and not try to lean. If we're trying to make stuff better and try to make not just the police department accountable, but us accountable, because we have to be accountable if we're going to really look at these things objectively, and then really look at it and say, what can be done better in interest to all that is involved. I don't want the CCRB, people look at the CCRB as an agency or entity that's attacking officers. We're trying to correct conduct, okay? And the correcting conduct has nothing to do with the reprimand. But if the conduct begins to correct, I guess the reprimand would be lesser, And so I personally think that for a police commissioner who has not been that open to a whole lot of other stuff, I'm glad she's working and doing her job, but it's interesting to put out an email blast, on and to that extent, where we get it afterwards and we're hearing it from the public, about what our findings are, and there's supposed to be an MOU and an agreement of working with them.
I too feel like this is a deliberate slight by the recently appointed police commissioner. I know that the chair has been ready, willing, and open to meet with the commissioner on a variety of issues, including the matrix. I'm beginning to feel like this disrespect is genuine in terms of not wanting to work with the CCRB, and that the CCRB, that we have to be very, very strong in terms of our response to this. And in terms of our intent to get the new commissioner to understand that, in fact, this was their product. And if she wants to disavow it, disavow it. Say it. Just say it. That they're not working with this anymore. But for us to be held captive to it and to throw it to the wayside is not appropriate. I think it has served some. Has benefited the CCRB, and I think it's benefited our process. I don't agree with all of it at all. I never have. But this type of behavior from one agency to another agency, particularly a watchdog agency, is inappropriate in my opinion. And notwithstanding the mayor's very generous comments in the appointment of our new member in terms of about the value of the CCRB, I don't see that reflected in his commissioner's email statement. So there needs to be some accountability, and we don't believe in kicking down doors or midnight raids on One Police Plaza, but there needs to be a little bit of excitement from our side about not actually outrage, but some excitement from outside that this is not appropriate.
Thank you, Esmeralda. Did anyone else want to make a comment? Any other comments?
I'll just make one more. It's funny, I'm trying to remove myself from the process and recognize the anxiety and stress on both sides of debate, and I do see that. As many of you, I suspect, saw, the New York Times last week ran a big article about the huge numbers of police officers retiring. The New York Times, about a week ago, ran a huge number of articles about the officers retiring, large numbers, and other less worldly papers, that is to say, papers that you don't find if you're in Paris, perhaps, or whatever, but have been running those for about a year. And the Times talked about financial incentives and to be other places and things like that. What I know from talking to police officers throughout the city is that their perception is that the disciplinary system, when it comes from the CCRB process, does not understand their workings. And it is one of the biggest reasons that I hear that they leave. What I hear them say is that they can do what they understand to be consistent with their training, to be the right thing, and yet it is likely, or I would say very, very possible, that CCRB will misunderstand what they did and rule that they were wrong, and then because of the strength or excessiveness of the matrix, that there will be a very excessive penalty, in their opinion, imposed upon them. So, given that I am hearing that, I suspect that is being heard in Police Plaza, and thousands of officers are leaving. And often when I see names of officers leaving, I know them to have immense experience, and their leaving is a great loss, particularly senior staff. And I do think that it is very important that, as the city charter said in the days under Mayor Dinkins when this was established, that our workings with the police department must be understood by the community and the members of the police department as fair and just. The charter doesn't use those exact words, but it uses similar words, because otherwise the system falls apart. So I believe part of the urgency in this is to say the process is going to be looked at, and an attempt being made to quickly ensure that there is fairness felt, and perhaps, and it needs to be fairness obviously felt on both sides.
Thank you, Frank, for that comment. I just wanted to once again repeat some of the things that you've heard. First of all, that the discipline matrix, as John eloquently pointed out, has been an iterative process. I also wanted to state that the CCRB did not create the penalties that exist in the discipline matrix. So I just wanted to be very clear about that. And I also wanted to reference what Ms. Irish had spoken to us about, that there are different issues we're talking about. There's the penalties, and then there's also the substantiations. And both issues will be looked at as we move forward, and they will be pushed for to be done with the CCRB, because 30 years ago, the people of New York City decided that the police department needed the independent oversight of an entity that would be made up of a body of citizens, and that became the CCRB. And as long as we are in effect, we will continue to carry on that role. Yohaira, who's next on the list?
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the virtual portion of public session.
If you're interested in making a public comment, please line up behind the podium. As a reminder, please keep your comments to 4 minutes. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Very loud. My name is Jen Vin Wong. I'm a staff attorney with the Legal Aid Society's Cop Accountability Project. Thank you for holding this meeting tonight, and thank you for all the great work that CCRB has been doing. First, I'd like to commend some things that the CCRB had announced earlier, which was a posting of the redacted closing reports. I think that's a great step towards transparency and accountability, and I know that that is something that the Legal Aid Society itself has been doing through our FOIL requests that we have received from the CCRB, and so I'm really happy to see that the CCRB is doing that on their own now. I wanted to address this discussion about the police commissioner's email. And one thing I wanted to bring up was, and I know that Chris Dunn has already brought this up, I agree with my colleague in everything he said. When the Matrix was first announced, there was a lot of public comments, many hours of labor and consideration were put into the public comments that were submitted about it. And one of the criticisms that was submitted was that the police commissioner having final authority could undermine the efficacy of the Matrix and could undermine the fairness of it. And in this email that was sent out, the police commissioner had deviated 70 times, more than any of her predecessors. And I think what that really shows is that this criticism has borne out, and it has undermined CCRB and has undermined the Matrix. And it sounds as though the CCRB was not consulted, at least thus far, with respect to amending the Matrix. And I have to agree with my colleague, Mr. Dunn, that that's very troubling, considering the MOU, considering all the great work that CCRB has done in working towards greater transparency and accountability. I think that we all knew that when the Matrix was published that there would eventually be some comments, an assessment of the efficacy of it. And I think there was also an expectation that not only would the CCRB be involved, but that perhaps this Matrix would also be accountable to the public. Any changes would be open to public comment. And it's very troubling if that's not going to be the case. And the police commissioner is going to be on her own doing away with whatever she feels is not appropriate or should not be included in the Matrix without any kind of public comment, public engagement, and especially without any kind of engagement or analyses done by the CCRB. So that's first and foremost. I know that the CCRB in the past has advocated to retain final authority over their own cases, and I think that this is an example of an instance where perhaps the discussion should be revived. I have one other comment to make that's unrelated to the Matrix, but is actually related to the Racial Profiling and Bias Unit, and it's actually a question that I have with respect to the investigations, and that really is, how is the CCRB investigators dealing with the force and effect of court decisions, for example, in suppression hearings in criminal court, where a court has found that there was an unlawful stop? How does the CCRB investigations take those court decisions into account? Is a new investigation started from scratch, or is the CCRB giving deference to that court's decision and finding that an officer made an unlawful stop? And thank you for your time.
For your question. Turn it to John to respond.
So with regard to individual cases that we investigate, they're all done on a case-by-case basis. And it is not necessarily a one-to-one correlation between a court's decision that a police action should result in suppression of evidence or in a dismissal of a criminal case, and that there was misconduct committed by the officer. So we try and gather as much of the evidence as we possibly can and evaluate it. Many times we are, in fact, looking at cases before there has been any kind of judicial review of the underlying police activity. So it is not like we have that to rely upon as whether or not the stop was constitutional or not.
Just a follow-up question on that.
Can you come back to the mic?
Just a follow-up question on that. Given that the CCRB's rules have been amended so that CCRB can self-initiate complaints, I'm wondering if there's anything that triggered, for example, if there's a suppression hearing and it's been found by a court over at 100 Center that Officer John Doe acted unlawfully and unlawfully stopped and searched an individual. Is there any kind of systemic way that the CCRB would be able to track those kind of cases and trigger an investigation under this new authority, given the amendment?
So the answer to the question, is there a way? The answer is there is always a way, as our IT person often tells me, but that does not mean that there is currently a way. We are not doing that now, and it is not on the horizon for us to do so, but, people from legal aid and other defender organizations in the city do refer cases to us, and we then investigate them.
Thank you. Would the CCRB consider finding a way to more systemically track those kind of decisions, given the new authority to self-initiate complaints?
I think it's something we would consider, yes.
Thank you.
Please step to the mic.
So if people are interested in speaking, you're next, but if there are other people who are interested in speaking, if you should line up behind the person who is about to speak.
I'd like to comment before the next speaker.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's funny. This is, I appreciate you throwing that, but this is something I've thought about for a long time also. I also think that it has to go both ways, that if evidence is not suppressed, that is to say the judge finds, oh, yes, that was a good search, the gun was legally seized, then we should not, because we don't know there's a parallel universe, we should not be finding the officer did an illegal search when a judge found that he didn't do an illegal search. So, if this is an avenue that's going to be explored, which may be easy to do with court records today, or maybe like that thing that happened at the laboratory 2 days ago, it may be a 10-year scientific process, but it has to go both ways. You can't say, oh, a judge allowed the gun into evidence, but we're going to decide that it was a bad search after a Supreme Court judge has allowed it into evidence. On the second point, and I want to be explicitly clear, I am not blaming anybody other than there was, I think, a collective responsibility among us on the board, given COVID, given all the things going on, given the fact that the budget is being cut. We did say we would submit to the police department. I believe we initially said after 6 months, a report on what we thought about the matrix. Certainly at one point we said after a year we would submit it. So we had an agreement to submit, and we did not make that submission. And I want to be explicitly clear. I'm certainly not blaming the staff. As far as I'm concerned, they work excessively hard, particularly the executive director. But it's not like comments have not been welcome. We just have not submitted a comprehensive report. And this is something that I have raised a few times over the years. I think there should be a collection of what each board member thinks. I think there should be a collection of information of what the policymakers and the administration think. And I think there should be a collection of what the individual investigators and other people who do the real downright day-to-day work think, and I think we should submit that report. And it's an odious task because it's so complex, and there were so many subdivisions, and there were so many. But I just want to be clear that it's not that we have not been welcome to submit something.
I just want to, my recollection is different in that I remember saying we were going to prepare a report for the public, not submit a report to the NYPD. And it was not that we had to submit a report in order to have changes to the matrix evaluated. To me, we were holding ourselves accountable to the public to say, we are taking this on, we know it has problems, but we are going to monitor it and produce something that explains, where we are at with it. I don't even know if we set a report or just that we were going to assess it in 6 months and a year. I do believe that we have, staff, CCRB staff has been reaching out to the police department about issues with the matrix on a regular basis. The other thing is, one of the issues in trying to produce something, any kind of assessment with the matrix, was the fact that there was such a extended delay between when we started submitting recommendations on the matrix and when the NYPD started acting on those recommendations and issuing a disciplined decision. And so that delayed our ability to actually analyze what was going on with the matrix itself.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Hello. No, okay. Hi, my name is Kimball Hartman, and I've thought before I came here that this is for education, but I'm glad this came up because, in my perception, I think public education should include psychology for kids at a younger age because they would learn how to work with it later, which now I agree with Frank that it is a misunderstanding. And a lot of people just seem, in my perception, seem to be having a very defense mechanism going on back and forth because how police officers are kind of going through a lot of well, harassment from the people as the people are feeling harassed from them. I think it's a misunderstanding. And I think public education should have psychology along with it to avoid less misunderstanding. And that'd be it. Yay.
Your comments, 4 minutes or less.
Hello, how are you? My name is Andrew. I'd like to have some clarification on the CCRB website on the gathering evidence. So when somebody files a complaint against a police officer, what's the procedure to gather evidence according to your website that you have set up?
Okay, Andy, for your question.
So the agency speaks to civilians involved in the incident, requests police paperwork. We, in cases where we have the ability to do so, we send people to the field to investigate to go to the area where the incident occurred and see if there are witnesses we can speak to, most especially collect video evidence from the scene.
Okay.
Once all that evidence is been collected, including body worn camera footage, we then prepare for officer interviews. We then interview the officers. Once the officers are interviewed, the investigators collate and organize the evidence, put it into a closing report, and make recommendations to the board. At that point, the cases go to the board for the board to make final determinations about whether the alleged incidents occurred, and if they did occur, whether they were misconduct.
And do you gather evidence from the person, from the victim as well?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nobody had gathered evidence when law enforcement had brutally assaulted me and threw me in the sidewalk against my will. I went to the hospital for bodily injuries. So nobody from the CCRB has contacted me about the other recording device that captured them giving me a beatdown. And when I told the CCRB that they had erased the cameras off the building, that had taken down the cameras off the building and erased video evidence, like they did to Laquan McDonald in Chicago when they murdered him. Law enforcement had murdered him. They showed this on the news. The law enforcement went to Burger King and they had erased the video. They did the same thing to me. So when I reported that to the CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, nobody contacted me about the other recording device. So how can we move forward from here? Now, am I the first person that the CCRB has done this to, or have they done this to other people? That's the same question I asked about law enforcement. When law enforcement gives me a beatdown when they attack people, am I the first person, or have they done this to other people? So, they've done this.
Just a moment to answer the question.
Okay.
So the agency makes every effort it can to investigate and collect evidence from as many civilians as possible. And while I understand you feel that your case was not handled appropriately by the CCRB, I've been personally involved with your cases for months now, and I believe that the investigators who have handled your cases have done an appropriate job.
Okay, so you're contradicting yourself. You just said that you, the CCRB, would gather evidence from the victims as well. You're contradicting yourself. Nobody contacted me about the evidence that I captured law enforcement giving me a beatdown. Down to this day, nobody has checked out my evidence, down to this day. So you're contradicting yourself. That's a contradiction.
I just think we disagree about how these investigations have gone forward.
I don't disagree. I agree with you. I'm asking you, what's the procedure? You told me.
Correct. And then you say that we have not contacted you and obtained your evidence.
Go ahead.
And I believe we have your evidence.
So we don't disagree. We agree together. You had informed me that the CCRB gathers evidence from the victim as well. So we're not disagreeing. We are agreeing. Nobody had gathered evidence from me down to this day. When law enforcement gave me a beat down, forced me in the sidewalk against my will, nobody has checked out the evidence when they gave me a beat down on another recording device. So we are in agreement. Nobody has checked out my recording device. That's what I'm saying. Now, that's on your website. I did not put that there.
May I ask you of more evidence that you would like to give to an investigator tonight?
Would you like the copy of?
Well, I think if you have more evidence that you would like to give to an investigator tonight, we have investigators here.
Sure.
So, I mean, this
I'd be more than happy,
this
sure.
may help. So, I mean, I'm
I'd be
sure
more
one
than-
of the investigators would be happy to meet with you and accept what evidence you have.
I'd be more than
Would
happy.
you be able to meet with him? Oh, that's not you, this? Sorry. I have it here. Sorry. Emma and Kamani, and then Yvonne from CAU. Why don't you meet with Andrew and again, get his evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I feel that the CCRB might do something, although that they didn't do things before, and I feel that's why they're still attacking me today. Because they're doing this site work again, March 25th or March 5th. I can't remember the date right now, but I filed a complaint, because they keep on attacking people. And that's the court case I gave you before.
Thank you. So you're going to speak to,
Okay.
to the investigators. We appreciate your question and your comment, Andrew. Okay. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Do we have anyone else who would like to make a public comment? All right, seeing none. Do we have any old business to come before the board this evening? Any old business? Do we have any new business to come before the board this evening? All right, hearing none, I'm going to move now that we break into executive session. The agenda for executive session is the board will receive an update from the executive director on our annual report and on pending personnel issues. I would like to call for a motion to close out the meeting.
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.